Chicago, November 22nd, 1987, 11:20 p.m. Thousands of households are watching PBS station WTTW's late-night broadcast of Doctor Who. Mid-episode, the screen cuts to static. Then a figure appears close to the camera, too close, wearing a latex mask with oversized features and dark glasses, swaying back and forth in front of a spinning, corrugated metal background. A distorted voice begins to speak. Nobody watching has any idea who this is or how they got on their television. To understand why someone chose this mask, you need to understand what Max Headroom meant in 1987. He had started as a fictional AI television presenter in a 1985 British film, a glitching, satirical character who claimed to be computer-generated and who skewered media culture. By 1987, he had his own American network show, was appearing in Coca-Cola advertisements, and was one of the most recognizable faces on television. He was deliberately a symbol of media itself. The first intrusion came earlier that same evening at around 9:14 p.m. WGN-TV, one of Chicago's major independent stations, was broadcasting its evening news. The sports anchor was mid-segment when the signal was cut. For approximately 17 seconds, the masked figure appeared on screens across the city. The hijackers hadn't managed to get audio through. Viewers only heard a loud buzz. Then WGN's engineers changed the signal frequency, and the broadcast was restored. Nobody knew what had just happened. The hijackers didn't stop. 2 hours later, they tried again. This time on WTTW, the Chicago PBS affiliate. The timing was significant. It was after 11 p.m. when fewer engineers were on duty at the transmitter. WTTW's signal tower was atop a different building from WGN's. Whoever did this had scouted both locations, understood the technical requirements for both towers, and was now attempting a second, better prepared intrusion. This time they had audio. The WTW intrusion lasted approximately 90 seconds. The figure filled the screen. The mask, the dark glasses, the corrugated metal spinning behind them. They swayed from side to side in the exaggerated glitching style of the character they were imitating. The visual was clearly pre-recorded, not live. Someone had set up a camera, filmed this, and then used technical equipment to broadcast it over a licensed television signal to thousands of households in a major American city. It is the most audacious broadcast piracy in American history. The audio was a distorted stream of apparently incoherent content. The figure referenced a local sports anchor by name, called him a frickin' liberal. They waved a Pepsi can, a jab at Coca-Cola, whose advertising the real Max Headroom fronted. They hummed the theme from Clutch Cargo, an obscure 1950s cartoon. They mentioned a local newspaper. They made reference to someone's brother. None of it cohered into a clear message. That, some researchers believe, was entirely deliberate. The incoherence was the point. The 90-second broadcast ended with the masked figure bending over and presenting their bare bottom to a second person, apparently a woman, who spanked them with a fly swatter. Then the transmission cut off, not because WTTW's engineers had stopped it. They never managed to. It ended because whoever was broadcasting it simply switched off their transmitter. They were finished. They left on their own terms. Doctor Who resumed. Chicago went to bed, confused. The technical method was well understood, even in 1987. Television and FM radio signals can be overridden by the capture effect. If a more powerful signal on the same frequency reaches the broadcast tower, it takes over the transmission. The hijackers needed a mobile transmitter powerful enough to overwhelm the station's own signals, placed somewhere in the line of sight of both towers, which sat atop two of Chicago's tallest buildings. The equipment existed, it was not cheap, and it required someone who knew exactly how to use it. Experts who analysed the incident concluded that the hijackers needed a high-powered microwave transmitter, a directional antenna, a video playback deck, a location with line-of-sight access to both tower sites, and the technical knowledge to synchronize it all. This was not an impulsive act. The equipment had to be sourced, the locations scouted, the video filmed and edited in advance, and the whole operation run from a mobile setup, likely a vehicle, parked somewhere in downtown Chicago. At minimum, 2 or 3 people were involved. The Federal Communications Commission and the FBI opened an immediate investigation. Broadcasting without a license over a licensed frequency was a serious federal offense, carrying potential fines and prison time. Investigators interviewed station employees, technical staff, and anyone in the Chicago broadcast engineering community who might have the skills. They analyzed the video frame by frame. They traced equipment suppliers. After months of work, they had identified no suspects and had no leads they could follow to a conclusion. In 1992, 5 years after the incident, the federal statute of limitations expired. The people responsible could no longer be prosecuted. Whatever they had done, whatever federal broadcasting laws they had broken, they were now legally untouchable. The FCC and FBI had not found them within the window. The investigation, already cold, became permanently closed. The perpetrators, wherever they were, had got away with it completely. The most widely held theory is that the perpetrators were young men from Chicago's electronics and hacker community. People who had the technical knowledge, the access to surplus broadcast equipment, and the countercultural motivation to pull something like this off. Chicago in the 1980s had an active underground of radio pirates, electronics hobbyists, and early computer enthusiasts. The stunt had the hallmarks of that world: technically impressive, deliberately absurdist, contemptuous of authority, and designed to be talked about. A competing theory holds that it was an inside job, that someone with direct knowledge of the station's technical infrastructure, signal frequencies, and scheduling made it significantly easier. A recently fired engineer, a disgruntled employee, or someone with access to broadcast specifications they shouldn't have shared. The fact that both stations were targeted on the same night, with precise knowledge of their transmitter locations and operating frequencies, suggested familiarity that went beyond what a purely external actor would normally have. Analysts who have studied the 90-second video closely believe the specific references: the local sports anchor, the Pepsi can, the obscure cartoon, point to someone with a very particular Chicago media culture background. The references are too specific to be random, too niche to be mainstream. Whoever made this had watched a lot of Chicago television, had opinions about local media figures, and had a sense of humor that operated on multiple registers simultaneously: juvenile, satirical, and deeply strange. When the internet arrived, the Max Headroom Incident found a new life. The original WTTW footage was uploaded and watched by millions. Reddit threads ran for years. Amateur investigators catalogued every frame, every audio fragment, every background detail. In 2010, a user claimed to know who was responsible. The claim generated intense interest, was investigated by others, and eventually faded as unverifiable. No credible identification has ever been publicly confirmed by anyone with direct knowledge. This is perhaps the most interesting detail of all. Since 1992, the people responsible have faced no legal risk whatsoever. They could walk into a television studio today and explain exactly how they did it. They could write a book. They could post a video. They would face no prosecution. And yet, for nearly 4 decades, nobody has. No deathbed confession, no memoir, no anonymous tip that checked out. Whoever they are, they have chosen continued anonymity over the recognition that the stunt arguably deserves. The ongoing silence has led some analysts to a troubling possibility. The perpetrators may no longer be alive. If the stunt was pulled by young men in their 20s in 1987, they would be in their late 50s or 60s today. It is plausible, not certain, but plausible, that the secret has already gone with them, that the answer exists only in the memory of people who took it with them, and that the Max Headroom Incident will remain permanently unsolved, not because the evidence can't be found, but because the witnesses are gone. Whatever the motivation, the Max Headroom Incident landed in exactly the right cultural moment. Max Headroom, the character, was a satirical AI who embodied television's relationship with itself: glitching, self-referential, slightly threatening. Someone had taken that symbol and used it to demonstrate that the broadcast medium that created him was vulnerable, penetrable, not as controlled as it appeared. The stunt was, in its own strange way, a piece of media criticism delivered through the medium being criticized. WGN-TV still broadcasts. WTTW still broadcasts. The towers they used in 1987 still stand. The broadcast landscape has changed enormously. Cable, streaming, digital signals have replaced the analog microwave transmissions that were vulnerable to override. The specific technical exploit used in 1987 would not work today, but the original footage is still on YouTube. It has millions of views. Every few years, a new wave of people discovers it for the first time, and the same question gets asked: who did this? The Max Headroom Incident inspired a small wave of broadcast intrusions in the years that followed. None as technically sophisticated, none as culturally resonant. The FCC subsequently tightened regulations around broadcast security. But the original remains singular. Nobody has ever matched the combination of technical execution, cultural specificity, and sheer audacity that the Chicago intrusion demonstrated. It sits alone in the history of broadcast piracy, in a category of one. Somewhere in the world, at least one person knows exactly what happened on November 22, 1987. They know who wore the mask. They know whose voice was distorted by the audio processor. They know whose hand held the fly swatter. They know where the transmitter was parked and who built it and how they got it there. They have carried that knowledge for nearly 40 years. They have watched the internet try to find them, and they have said nothing. 90 seconds, 2 television stations, 1 city, 1 night. A rubber mask, a corrugated metal background, a fly swatter, and a transmitter powerful enough to take over the airwaves of a major American city. No prosecution, no confession, no explanation. The most technically accomplished and culturally specific act of broadcast piracy in history, executed, completed, and then buried in silence so complete that nearly 4 decades of investigation, both official and amateur, have produced exactly nothing. The mask is still out there, and it has never said who was behind it.